was it? Was it 5?
Do 5, yeah. One thing is that the camera focuses on people when they walk down the aisle.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I'll fix that.
Yeah, that's fine. I think when people sit down.
And the lights being off will help with that too.
Yeah. Do it.
Hello,
Hit it.
can I have your attention for a second? I'm just going to ask in Spanish if anyone needs Spanish interpreting. ¿Hay alguien que necesita o que quiere intérprete al español? Si quieres, yo voy a estar ahí. Puedes avisarme si necesitas o quieres intérprete al español. Gracias.
All right, since we have all of your attention, we're going to get started. Welcome everybody to Freedom Road Socialist Organization's International Women's Day panel. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Mira. I am an organizer with Students for a Democratic Society at the University of Minnesota, as well as a member of Freedom Road, and I will be one of your MCs today. I'm going to pass it along to Merlin to introduce themselves and get us started with the program. Right. This is Mira. Hold on. Hello, my name is Merlin. I am also an organizer with Students for a Democratic Society at the University of Minnesota. And I'm a proud member of Freedom Road Socialist Organization. So Freedom Road is a national organization of revolutionaries fighting for socialism in the United States. We are rooted in mass movements, as you'll see today, and believe in a united front against capitalism with the strategic alliance of the multinational working class and oppressed nationalities. International Women's Day is a socialist holiday, originally created in 1908 to celebrate working women in garment factories in New York. On this International Women's Day, we stand with the women of Palestine who are facing horrors beyond our imaginations as they fight for peace, the right of return, and a free and liberated Palestine from the river to the sea. Today we will be hearing from gender-oppressed people from across the movements. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we will be hearing from the Freedom Road Socialist Organization speaker. So first I will be introducing Nicole. Nicole Mason right here. She is an organizer with Nana Kazi and a local leader in the Roof Depot struggle. Next we have Miriam, a Palestinian American who was born and raised in Minnesota. She's a former member and president of Students for Justice in Palestine at the University of Minnesota, where she helps pass divestment on campus and is currently an advisor and volunteer member for the Minnesota chapter of American Muslims for Palestine. She is passionate about educating her community on Palestine to empower and inspire them to mobilize and work towards liberation. Next we have Iman, an organizer from Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee. And we have Jay Yates, an activist in the Black Liberation Movement, primarily organizing for community control of the police in Minneapolis. As a member of both Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamar and Freedom Road, Jay works with impacted families and community members to build true police accountability in Minnesota. And lastly, we have Autumn Lake, a leader in the reproductive rights movement, and is one of the founding members of the Minnesota Abortion Action Committee. Before that, she was an active anti-imperialist organizing with a particular focus on Palestine. So now that I've introduced our panelists, we will now be hearing from Olivia Kroll to give the Freedom Road speech.
Greetings, friends and comrades. I am honored to be here with you tonight in celebration of one of my favorite proletarian holidays. Let's hear it for International Women's Day. Every year in March, we commemorate the long history of working and oppressed women all over the world who have stood up and fought back against gender oppression, exploitation, and the system of monopoly capitalism that seeks to rule over their lives. International Women's Day is a holiday born out of the heroic fight waged by New York City garment workers in 1908 to improve their living and working conditions. Through strikes and protests and the largest single work stoppage in the United States at that time, female garment workers made historic strides for our class and the labor movement as a whole. Their bravery was recognized by workers around the world, in particular by revolutionaries like Clara Zetkin, who proposed that socialists adopt an international celebration to honor the struggle of working women. 116 years later, we're still honoring that moment in history, and we're still taking lessons from it. But International Women's Day isn't simply an opportunity for reflection. It's a call to action, to take from our revolutionary history and chart a path forward. We should be affirming our commitment to fight for women's liberation across all of our movements in the year to come. Tonight, we'll hear from speakers representing a variety of struggles, like the fight for climate justice and indigenous sovereignty, for housing as a human right, for legalization for all and the rights of immigrants, for reproductive justice and abortion access, for police accountability and freedom from state violence, for divestment from Israeli apartheid, and more broadly what I know unites everyone in this room tonight, an end to occupation once and for all. As I'm sure our panelists will tell you, our movements should always seek to improve the conditions of women and gender-oppressed people. This includes queer, trans, and non-binary folks who face attacks and marginalization simply for existing outside of the traditional gender binary and gender division of labor that was created originally to oppress women under capitalism. LGBTQ oppression stems from the same source as women's oppression, and so our struggles cannot be excluded or sidelined, especially on days like today. And so I challenge us all, organizers and people of conscience, to take up the struggle against gender oppression in our demands, in our strategies, in everything we do. As socialists, we know that gender oppression isn't simply a social question. It has a material basis, which manifests in things like access to jobs, unequal pay, the costs of reproductive and gender-affirming healthcare, and more. At the same time, we must also fight for immediate gains in the realm of democratic rights. I'm talking about abortion and bodily autonomy, marriage equality, including the right to divorce, protections against discrimination, and so on. We should uplift the leadership of women and gender-oppressed people and combat chauvinism wherever it crops up. Our movements certainly could not exist without their hard work and dedication on the front lines, leading the way for our collective liberation, holding up more than half the sky. I'd like to focus our attention this evening on Palestine. How can we gather and speak about the state of the world without turning our eyes to the single sharpest contradiction that exists today, the ongoing struggle to liberate Palestine and defeat Zionism?
Yes.
There is nowhere else to look. On this International Women's Day, we must show our unconditional solidarity with the women of Palestine, women with immense bravery and courage, who are not only fighting for their own lives, but for the lives of their families and the preservation of their people against genocide. Say it with me. Resistance is justified when Palestine is occupied.
Resistance is justified when Palestine is occupied.
Resistance is justified
When Palestine is occupied.
That's right. For over 100 years, Palestinian resistance has been teaching the rest of the world what it means to fight for a future that we all deserve. In the face of forced displacement, military bombardment, occupation, apartheid, and genocide, they have stood firm in asserting their self-determination and right to historic homelands from the river to the sea. And in doing so, in daring to resist every attack on their nationhood, on their humanity, they have laid bare the evils of colonization and imperialism on a world scale. There's no denying it now. The United States government not only supports a genocide in its diplomacy, but directly participates in the mass murder and collective punishment of Palestinians. Because without the billions of dollars of US military aid, Israel would not have a leg to stand on. But the tide is changing in this country, and millions are getting into the streets, inspired by, or horrified by the atrocities in Gaza, but inspired by the persistence of the Palestinian people. Millions are learning how to fight and how to use their voice for the first time. They're learning that we share a common enemy in the monopoly capitalist class, which not only rules over this country with brutality, but has aspirations to dominate the entire globe with its system of exploitation. But they won't get the chance, not so long as the women of Palestine continue to stand tall and resist occupation. And not so long as we continue to stand with them and all women of the world opposing imperialism. There is no better way to celebrate International Women's Day than to extend our unconditional solidarity and say, victory to the Palestinian resistance. As we look to the year to come, we can expect to see continued attacks on women and gender-oppressed people, just as in recent years, we've seen reproductive rights curtailed and heightened attacks on the queer and trans community. But as long as our oppression has existed, so too has our resistance. In Freedom Road, we know that we cannot have true liberation under a broken system that continues to fail the majority of people in this country and beyond. We're not just fighting for crumbs, we are fighting for a new world, for an economic system that addresses the fundamental roots of inequality in all of its forms. We're fighting for socialism, and we invite you to join us. Happy International Women's Day.
All right, and now we're going to start hearing from our wonderful panel of speakers. Please give them a round of applause.
Bonjour, I'm Nicole, and I'm one of the camp organizers for Camp Ninokasi. We've been helping the relatives since August 17th of 2023. I believe we're somewhere about 205 days out with the relatives. We've been evicted 6 times. And I don't know if everybody recognizes that our camp is about 90% Native American. Okay? So we're being pushed out from our own land without solutions. So it's very much similar, you know? A lot of things have happened. You know, there's good things, beautiful things. It's not all just, you know, the sad evictions or the things that have happened, but, you know, so many people. We started with 236 people in our camp, and we are approximately between 50 and 60 right now. So everybody's either went off to housing or into chemical, depends, or chemical treatment, you know? That's huge. As a person, I'm a peer support specialist. That's what I was doing before the camp. So we've sent off about 30 people off to treatment, but with the new people, probably about 32. And about only 3 have come back, which is huge success, you know, they're all in recovery. I watch the videos and things on the internet, the sad things that are happening in Palestine. We have a lot of the things that we go through at the camp that are the same, bottles being thrown at us, telling us to go home, which I don't understand what that means. When we are home, we're from here. And a lot of mean comments on the internet, it's hurtful. And being pushed out with nowhere to go with the people. I live at the camp. I mean, I have a home, but I choose to live there to help with security and help with the consistency for the people to know that, hey, if I'm feeling sad or if I need something, someone is here to fulfill that need. And so I stay there with them. Recently, we had a fire. essentially, we're filing a TRO against the mayor and the city administration right now. We have court on the 14th. We're gonna have a march at 5 o'clock at the government plaza. We're gonna have a rally out there in support for this. The day before the court, and we have court at the federal court building on the 14th at 9 a.m. 14 declarations came out of our camp from our residents that were brave enough to say enough is enough and speak up for themselves. You know, how many people are from Palestine here? How many people are actually? So, this temporary restraining order is to try and keep the people safe, right? But the mayor's office sent us a letter back and said, since the camp burnt down, that we are removed. But I see us all right there. We still exist. They're trying to say that Nenokasi is property, since the camp is gone. But you understand that Nenokasi is the people, it's not the property. If you are from Palestine, you're drawn to that because that's your people. That's your homeland. You want to help. It's not something there, it's inside of you. And so I don't know what will happen with everything that we work so hard to do. But please show and support on the 13th. It shows a lot. Because everything that's happened is very traumatized. We're very traumatized. It was hard for me to get here. After I'm done talking, I want to go. It was very hard to not know if people were burning or if we had lost somebody in that fire. And they won't investigate if it was arson. We've had many things happen of fires at our camp and things thrown at us and our signs taken down. And so being on our homeland, we're still terrorized and we're here in the United States where supposedly we're free and whatnot. And it really makes us natives feel like they want to get rid of us. This is truly not government land as long as us natives still stay living. But I wanted to come and support everybody because this is very important. It's very important for people to support that when they have absolutely no control. And that's exactly how we feel. And so I wanted to come support because I can't imagine the people over there. We pray for them all the time. We talk about people in Palestine all the time at our camp. And that it's not much different. Feeling out of control in your own country is horrible. And it's traumatizing. And me being there, going along, living at the camp, going through everything that they go through. If they are afraid, I'm afraid. If they're hungry, I'm hungry. If they're cold, I'm cold. You understand? I'm there. I'm not with the cause. And then I go home at night. I'm going through it right along with them so that I can understand. And I've only been out there 7 months. And I'm very much hurt inside. A lot of people say, "Are you okay?" And I'm not okay. And I've only been out there 7 months. But I'm not going to go anywhere. I tell everybody I'm staying with the people. And I'm going to continue fighting for them. Because they need a voice. And they need somebody strong. But I know if I'm not okay, they're not either. And I apologize, I'm going to leave now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. You are such an inspiration. Obviously I attract a lot of people who are not Palestinian but are sympathetic to the cause, but it's really the natives. Palestine, from the river to the sea, we pray for land back here and for all natives. All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Palestinian woman. So the Palestinian woman, for me, is a symbol of dignity, love, and resistance. Our women, past and present, have shown the world what it means to live and fight for something you believe in. From the resistance of Layla Khalid, to the slap of an Israeli soldier from Ahad al-Tamimi, to the lionesses of Al-Aqsa, Khadija and Hanali Halawani, who put their bodies and their livelihoods to defend the sanctity of Al-Aqsa. To women like Micheline Awad, who following Sunday Mass took off her yellow heels and picked up stones to throw at IOF soldiers as they invaded Beit Sahur in what has become an iconic picture from the First Intifada. We have women like Hind and Bisan, who have been risking their lives to report from the ground in Gaza. We have Shireen Abu Aqla, who lost her life while reporting. We have Dr. Amira Al-Assouli, one of my personal heroes, who risked getting shot by Israeli snipers to help wounded people in front of Nasser Medical Complex. Before her, there was Razan al-Najjar, who was a nurse killed while tending to the injured of the Great March of Return. We have Muna al-Kurd, who led a global movement to save Sheikh Jarrah. "You are stealing my house" became a rallying cry. We have Marah Bakir, who was jailed at the young age of 16 years old and held for 8 years, but came out with a defiant smile, representing the resilience of our prisoners. They have all shown us the beauty of the Palestinian woman in stark contrast to the ugliness of Israeli occupation and aggression. These are the names of some of the women we know. There are many we don't know. But anyone who has lived with a Palestinian woman or mother has felt the presence and strength of the Palestinian woman. Palestinian women raise their children, us, to understand that our life is not more valuable than the lives of others who have sacrificed for the land. All of them, all of us, are for the land. My mom tells me, "I love you as much as I love Palestine." We are raised to understand that love for Palestine sets the standard. I grew up hearing my father recite, "Ummi hiya al-watan wa anta ya watani ummi." My mother is the homeland, and you, my homeland, are my mother. We understand that our love and sacrifice for our mothers and our homelands are intertwined. When we kiss our mother's hand, we are kissing the earth that her hands and those who have come before her have tilled. And while Palestinian women are a symbol of strength, they are also a symbol of heartbreak. They are injured and killed, they are kidnapped and tortured, they are starved, they watch their houses destroyed, their belongings looted. They bear the brunt of a brutal siege and assault. They don't have access to necessary sanitary products, they give birth with no anesthesia, they are displaced to tens, all while dealing with the emotional trauma of grief and loss. Palestinian women carry their children twice, once in the womb and once on their shoulders when they are martyred. The Palestinian woman is a woman of dignity and honor. It's why their enemies try to humiliate and dehumanize them in their sick, depraved ways. What they don't understand is that their behavior only shames them and their sick selves. A Palestinian woman does not derive her worth from a man, an Israeli man at that. She does not derive her worth from the West, or from human rights organizations, or from the international community, or from feminists who are selective in their rage. I can list out UN reports and statistics, news headlines and eyewitness accounts, but I won't, because frankly, it doesn't matter. 153 days in, 17 years in, 75 years in, it hasn't changed anything for them. If anything, a Palestinian woman has taught us, has taught me, that the only thing you should be seeking worth from are your principles and what you believe in. The only people worthy of your story are those who see you as human. The Palestinian woman is unbreakable, not because they don't hurt or don't grieve, but because they know that they have what Israel will never be able to take from them. They have faith, strength, resilience. They have a connection to the land that cannot be manufactured. They have families and communities that learn from them and will continue carrying their strength until Palestine is free from the river to the sea.
Those are really wonderful, thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Iman. I'm a member of the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, or MIRAC. Because we're here talking about gender oppression and violence, I want to offer a content warning because I will be talking about state violence and how it pertains to sexual violence, rape, and forced sterilization. Yeah, so I'm just going to give that a second. The way that the US government sets itself up to commit violence against oppressed people is with propaganda, like we're seeing now. It's dehumanizing, it's disgusting, and it's language that is used to describe people, especially in this case immigrants, as rapists, as drug traffickers, thieves, as lazy people, and as illegal. The word illegal especially is dehumanizing. What does it mean for a human being to be illegal? It means that those human beings are easily crammed in cages without adequate food, water, or access to health care. To them, it means that violence is committed at the border, the violence that's committed is justified, that deliberately shredding families with barbed wire under the ocean, that trapping people between walls, there's 2 of them now, and deliberately making those walls tall enough that if someone were to climb them, that they are going to die, right? That is what being illegal means. To be illegal means that border control can shoot you down, they can trap you, they can rape you, and they get away with it. You might not even hear the news stories. To take away your reproductive rights, your right to choose to keep your reproductive organs, and to have access to menstrual products for healthcare. Does this sound familiar? Gender violence impacts our society by deeply rooting in our understanding of what it means to be a human, to have worth, and to have value. It becomes especially easy to dismiss these claims when systems of misogyny and patriarchy have already done that work. They've already made you not human, less valuable. The reasons that we see violence like this is not only because of the actions of the perpetrators, but because the state is set up to wreak violence against oppressed people, which we know. When our government passes and enacts dehumanizing laws, when the media chooses to run dehumanizing stories, then the actions of those that uphold these ideals are intentionally violent. That's why we see that it's ICE and Border Patrol and Homeland Security agents that perpetrate this violence, specifically murder, rape, and denying access to health care. In this same vein, when we begin comparing the ways that immigrants are treated by the government in the United States to the violence by Israel and the Israeli occupation forces in Palestine, we see very, very similar patterns. Israel dehumanizes Palestinians the same way that the US dehumanizes immigrants. This genocide spans further back than October 7th, but with the parroting of major media, we heard language like human animals and children of darkness that were used to justify the indiscriminate murder of anyone and everyone in Gaza and the West Bank. We heard claims of civilian deaths, beheaded babies, and rape to justify this. But when the reality is that these crimes are being committed against the Palestinians by the IOF. This is just another example and falls under the history of US imperialism and soldiers' violence targeted against women. We can look to the thousands of reports of rape brought by US military personnel in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Vietnam, and in Japan. Right? The United States and the Israelis are the same. And I don't just mean in action, but I mean literally, because both come from the same pockets and bank accounts, both share the same greed and forms of violence. The reason that the same weapons that manufacture genocide in Gaza are being used to surveil the US-Mexico border is because they are one and the same. Fight against one is fight against them all. Thank you.
Test. Thank you. Hey y'all. My name is Autumn. I'm with the Minnesota Abortion Action Committee. I'm very honored to be able to share this space with so many brave revolutionaries, so many brave freedom fighters, so many people who are absolutely sick and tired of the way things are in this country. When Roe v. Wade was overturned nearly 2 years ago, organizers from across the progressive people's movements turned out in incredible numbers to condemn the Supreme Court's decision to eliminate what is considered around the world to be a fundamental human right. People came from the student movement, the movement for immigrant rights, the movement against police brutality. There were even people like myself who were involved in the Palestine Solidarity movement. I was in the anti-war committee at the time. The reason why this was so important, though, wasn't just because of the right to abortion itself, as critical as it is. In the United States, that ruling was foundational to so many other hard-fought rights. It's the cornerstone of all rights related to bodily autonomy, the ability for a person to make decisions about their own body without external influence or coercion, especially state coercion. In MNAC, we recognize that in addition to reproductive rights, bodily autonomy includes fundamental rights such as freedom from police violence, freedom from state repression, expanding immigrant rights, and upholding indigenous sovereignty and protecting the rights of workers. By striking down abortion rights in the US, the evangelical right has torn down the biggest roadblock for their plans to further attack bodily autonomy, including further attacks on healthcare, on privacy, and even on information itself. For this reason, even before the current wave of genocidal violence being enacted by the Israeli occupying regime, we recognize that the denial of bodily autonomy to Palestinians was one of the tools most frequently used by the Israeli occupying forces. Just as it's an effective tool of repression and control here in the US, it is a powerful weapon in the hands of violent occupiers. The status quo of life in occupied Palestine before October 7th was still uniquely abhorrent. The autonomy of Palestinians has historically been undermined through the denial of their freedom of movement, subjecting them to random searches, and forcing them to move through Israeli checkpoints and road obstacles. Between 2000 and 2007, 10% of pregnant Palestinians faced delays in accessing necessary health care due to these checkpoints, with 69 births occurring at these checkpoints during this time period, 35 infant deaths, and 5 maternal deaths. The bombings and military incursions into Gaza since 2007 have drastically impacted the ability for women to access sexual and reproductive health services. Delivery of essential supplies and medicines used in those services were either delayed or blocked outright by those attacks. Maternal health medicine used to treat vitamin deficiencies during pregnancy became so scarce that in 2018, 40% of pregnant women in Gaza were anemic. And now the medical infrastructure in Gaza has been so thoroughly destroyed that scraps of tents are having to be used in place of sanitary napkins for periods because the resources simply aren't available. The destructions of hospitals across Gaza has also destroyed the ability for women to access any sexual and reproductive health care, any basic health care, anything necessary for women to survive in those conditions. But again, reproductive rights and access to reproductive health care are only one dimension of bodily autonomy. Freedom from sexual violence is also one of the most important dimensions of bodily autonomy as well. And as far back as 1948, during the Nakba, Palestinian families cited the repeated rape of women by Zionist forces as one of the reasons they fled their homes. Throughout the history of Israeli occupation, rape has been an essential part of the Israeli interrogation techniques designed to terrorize women and force them into confessing under torture. Palestinian freedom fighter Razmia Odes has spoken publicly about her experience as a prisoner of the occupation after being arrested in 1969. Her interrogation included being beaten with wooden sticks and metal bars, and several horrific acts of sexual violence that I will not describe in this space. Many women who face torture as part of being held prisoner by the occupying forces do not speak up publicly about their experiences, but those that do often have very similar stories, and some are significantly worse. And nearly every day since the siege of Gaza has ramped up, more pictures of IDF soldiers posing with the underwear of women they've captured during the siege, since the siege of Gaza has ramped up, have been exposed. Nearly every day, more videos of IDF soldiers subjecting Palestinians to sexual humiliation and assault come to light. It's an absolute shame. Sorry, this is a tough thing to talk about. We've all encountered people who lack sympathy and empathy for the plight of our Palestinian siblings, and they'll try to make so many negative claims about the status of women and queer people in Palestinian society as a way to justify their own support for Israel's genocide, because they claim that Israel is some sort of paragon of human rights. First of all, I could never bring myself to criticize people in the process of resisting a genocide. Second of all, I am a transgender woman living in the United States. I'm hated and I face danger right here, right now, because of the actions of my government and the actions of violent right-wing extremists emboldened by misogynist hate in this country. And speaking of right-wing extremists, the right-wing evangelicals as a bloc have massive political power and influence and financial power here in the United States. It's how you have organizations like Alliance Defending Freedom pop up, and they're built on launching attacks on trans health care, the right for consenting adults to have same-gender relationships, and they were the organization that provided the model legislation that was used as the basis for the overturn of Roe v. Wade. These same forces have a positive outlook on Israeli occupation of Palestine, seeing it as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. This is how we get organizations like Stand for Israel, whose stated goal is to mobilize evangelical support for Israel, which has its roots in the anti-abortion and anti-LGBT Christian Coalition of America. All of this is to say that the financial and political forces here in the US that are working to destroy bodily autonomy, suppress the rights of women, and criminalize the LGBT community are also actively working to foster support and funding for Israel's campaign of genocide. As my co-panelists have illustrated, all of our movements are connected, all of our movements fight the same forces. And we in the reproductive rights movement are proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with all people of conscience as we resist the US's continued support of the occupation. The fight for bodily autonomy, the fight for women's liberation, the fight to liberate all people facing gender oppression is by necessity a fight against the occupation and control of oppressed peoples the world over. And in wrapping up, I want to let everyone know that the Minnesota Abortion Action Committee should be passing out some flyers about our current campaigns and our work, and very valuable information that y'all should get a hold of. So please keep an eye out for all those.
Thank you, Autumn. That was really amazing. Yeah, if you're wondering why a black guy is on this panel right now, my name is Jay. I am a transgender black activist, primarily doing work in the anti-police crimes struggle. And on this International Women's Day, I feel compelled to say first and foremost that My solidarity with Palestinian women, men, children, queer people, the elderly, and disabled comes from the recognition of the humanity of all people who have suffered under the brutality and greed of capitalism. We are watching one of the worst humanitarian crises in living memory play out on our phones in horrific detail while we're told by the ruling class that in fact this is not a genocide. Mothers scream for their children in the rubble while the Israeli soldiers who destroyed and looted their homes gleefully display the lingerie of Palestinian women on TikTok, but there's no genocide. Constant euphemisms and headlines and callous statements from Western politicians about the right for settlers to defend their stolen land come out daily while billions in taxpayer dollars are squeezed from people barely able to pay their rent and facilitate the deaths of over 30,000 people in occupied Gaza. But there is no genocide. It's no coincidence to me that when the first nation to openly accuse Israel of genocide on the national stage was South Africa. And perhaps no other people on earth knows the evils of apartheid more intimately than those in the African diaspora laboring against the legacy of slavery. It is also no coincidence that it was overwhelmingly countries that have suffered under Western imperialism like Mexico, Cuba, Venezuela, Yemen, and Ireland that quickly followed suit in expressing solidarity with Palestine. Though the struggle against national oppression in America looks different than in Palestine, the tactics used to silence and whitewash our oppression feel eerily similar. As a black person, I've heard my entire life that racism is just a crutch to avoid accountability for the abhorrent conditions facing the black people in America, that there are no institutional or social barriers keeping black people trapped in poverty, that slavery was abolished, and that we live in a golden age of meritocracy. This is a blatant lie, and one that aids the imperialist cause and leads to separating racist oppression out as an ideological problem of hearts and minds instead of a critical piece of maintaining monopoly capitalism. Racism is not a byproduct of capitalism, it is the ideological underpinning of national oppression, as it provides justification for the super-exploitation and disenfranchisement of people of color. It is also a convenient basis upon which to divide the working class, pitting workers against each other. And Lenin succinctly summed up the importance of this to understanding the national question in 1920 by saying, "In all their propaganda and agitation, both within Parliament and outside it, the Communist parties must consistently expose that constant violation of the equality of nations, of the guaranteed rights of national minorities, which is to be seen in all capitalist countries despite their democratic constitutions. It is also necessary to first constantly explain that only the Soviet system is capable of ensuring genuine equality of nations, by uniting first the proletarians and then the whole mass of the working population." Palestine is actually a perfect example of the way that the ruling class uses racist ideology to achieve its goals. The separation of people in historic Palestine into Arab and Jew, as though there is no overlap or commonality between the two, is a Zionist fabrication that served to divide and conquer the region in order to establish a Jewish ethno-state. As early as the 6th century, cohabitation of Jews and Arabs, Muslims and Christians was common in the territory we know as Palestine. There's strong evidence to suggest that after the fall of the Roman Empire, the Islamic Caliphate that ruled Palestine was one of the most religiously tolerant periods in its entire history, and Jews and Christians actually had protected status under this regime as the Caliphate recognized that all three religions had legitimate religious and cultural ties to the area. Yet the dominant narrative about Palestine is that this state of constant conflict has been going on for hundreds or thousands of years. In actuality, ordinary Jews, Arabs, and Christians have lived harmoniously in the so-called Holy Land the entire time. Additionally, it is critical to point out that all struggles for national liberation are intimately connected. The cobalt mined by Congolese slave labor is the same that powers the missile targeting software used in the bombardment of Gaza. The same Coca-Cola company that steals water from impoverished towns in Mexico is the same exploiting its largely non-white workforce in the US. Elbit Systems helps maintain the Iron Dome as well as the surveillance systems being built for Atlanta's top city. And it is minority women and gender-oppressed people that bear the worst of the consequences of oppression. Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor's murders at the hands of police helped raise awareness of the erasure of black women from police brutality statistics. But routinely, other groups like migrants and indigenous women also face unreported brutality and sexual violence at the hands of police and US military forces. A 2018 report from the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs indicated that 66% of all LGBTQ people who reported violence to the police were met with either indifference or hostility, with most violence going unreported in the first place due to mistrust of the police. The same report indicates that black LGBTQ people are 3 times more likely to experience police violence than non-black LGBTQ people. In Gaza, 42.9% of people seeking aid are women. 42.9% of people seeking aid are women, and most cannot access reproductive care, formula for their children, or even menstrual products. It is clear that the consequences of imperialism are far-reaching. We see this in the thousands of US military bases in occupied and sovereign territory around the world, in the unchecked exploitation of the global south and the tireless export of pro-imperialist propaganda. This is why all those who suffer under oppression must see the true face of our enemy in the monopoly capitalists. We must understand it so that we know its weaknesses and must work to build revolution now, within our lifetimes. As an anti-police crimes activist, I see the power of unity between those facing gender oppression and national oppression in my work every day. And it's the tireless energy of black women fighting on behalf of the stolen lives of their loved ones that propels our movement forward. And it's an honor to fight alongside them. It's an honor to fight alongside them for true police accountability that forces police to follow the will of the people instead of the ruling class. We demand community control and self-determination from Minneapolis to Palestine.
Thank you so much to all of our amazing speakers. We are going to take a short break right now. We're going to come back at 8 o'clock, but during those 15 minutes, please feel free to come up to the piano here next to this banner. We have paper and pens for people to leave questions for our panelists, which we will be hearing from them more at 8 o'clock. If you go out to the lobby, you can go ahead, please grab more food, and also check out the yard signs that the Anti-War Committee is selling. Let everyone know what's up and that you support a free Palestine. And then finally, Freedom Road has a table back there with my beautiful friend Celia where you can check out some books that we're selling and also talk to us about how to join if you're interested. So we'll see you all at 8.
going to have another half-ish hour of some question and answer for our lovely panelists here, and we'll get right into it. Thank you to those of you who came up and asked questions. So, first of all, these are all for the entire panel. What are some victories that Freedom Road Socialist Organization and or socialist countries have made in the struggle for women and oppressed genders?
It's me again. So in terms of like advances against gender oppression that have been made by socialist states, in basically every instance of a socialist revolution taking hold in a country, before the revolution, you see that the condition of women is completely terrible. Usually there is trying to figure out a way to phrase it that is friendly for the camera, but things are not good. Yeah, appreciate it. But no, seriously, like women in sexual servitude, including young women, including children, you know, arranged forced marriages, forced polygamy, are things that existed in a lot of these countries prior to socialist revolution. And one of the first successes of a socialist revolution is to immediately abolish all of those conditions. It is one of the first tasks that any socialist revolution takes, and it is the first of many victories that a socialist revolution achieves. You can see this in Cuba, you can see this in Vietnam, in the former Soviet Union. It goes so much further than that. Cuba to this day is kind of like the country to think of when it comes to reversing, you know, centuries of gender oppression and advancing the cause and rights of other gender oppressed people, of transgender people, of other LGBT people, including their like really expansive family law that they just implemented about a year ago, which basically states that, you know, families don't have to be this like nuclear man-woman marriage with, you know, however many kids, but it can just be like whoever is in a household taking care of each other is a family and they're afforded the same rights. The East German Republic, the former East German Republic, was an interesting example too, because they kind of had before Cuba was kind of the model for, you know, advancing transgender rights in the world. It was East Germany, and they were responsible for so many of the scientific advancements in, like, you know, giving, you know, LGBT people and trans people in particular, like, the medical intervention that they needed for their transition healthcare. It got to the point where in the 80s, I think, in Berlin, there was like a state-owned gay bar, which is like, I don't know, a really cool piece of history that happened there. I think one last thing before I hand this off to other people. Some of the biggest plights facing oppressed people, especially women, especially LGBT people, especially like people facing different forms of gender oppression is, like in the US at least, like access to housing, access to healthcare, access to employment are all very precarious if you are an LGBT person, if you are a woman, especially if you are a nationally oppressed woman. It's all very precarious. These are things that are guaranteed under socialism, like things that like typify the experience of being an oppressed person in the U.S. just don't fucking exist when you establish socialism. Whole arenas of oppression are just gone. I've been told I gotta cuss less at these things. Sorry.
No shame.
Thank you. I love you. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, the most obvious example that I can think of is, like, just the existence of the Black Panther Party. They were socialists. I feel like that's something that has very much been erased for a lot of people learning about the civil rights struggle in the United States, and, you know, there's probably a reason for that. And so not only the legacy of things like the free breakfast program, which is still implemented today, but also like the very concept of community control of the police came from socialists, came from members of the Black Panther Party who recognized the necessity for self-determinative power in Black communities in America, that there was no way to abolish the police, to even enact reforms on policing in America without real democratic control over the cops. And I think that like the legacy of that is how we got the ECPS victory in Chicago. That is something that organizers in Chicago are fighting against one of the most like well-organized, well-funded police federations in America. And they won by a landslide. Almost all of the police federation candidates that were put forward for ECPS lost. Like, that's a huge deal in a city as big as Chicago with a police brutality problem as big as Chicago's. And it's only by the work of those organizers that we're able to implement that campaign in Minneapolis. And so, like, I think that for me, there is no community control of the police without socialism. It's a socialist idea and it's a socialist program, and without the principles of socialism behind it, it would be meaningless. And so I think that that's a very concrete and like recent win that we can claim.
So our next question is, what is an oppressed nation?
I love how you looked directly at me for that question. So an oppressed nation. So first, like, what is a nation? A nation is a people that have a common territory, common language, common economic life, and have a common consciousness. And so the basis for saying, for example, that there is a Black nation in the US is because Black people who were stolen from Africa and brought here primarily made their homes in the south of the United States. And that is a historically Black part of this nation and a historically oppressed part of our nation. And so within the nation of the United States, there's also the Black nation, there's the Chicano nation, there are Native Americans as their own nation. And so when you're talking about national oppression, you're sort of talking about the control that imperialist regimes exert on nations to extract resources and to extract people a lot of the time, to extract their labor and to expropriate them to other places. And so, like, national oppression isn't just a substitute for racism, it's talking about, like, the complex system by which imperialist countries oppress groups with national identity, if that makes sense. Other people can also act.
Thank you. Our next question. Oh, did you have more to add?
It's fine.
All right. She says it's fine. I trust her. Next question. As a queer person of color, there are many times where the queer part of my identity is considered a white thing by some family and other community members. How might this be dealt with or addressed, especially when it's used to hurt those of us in the overlap who are doubly marginalized by those within and outside of our communities?
I think there's only two of us on the panel that can answer that, but I guess I can go first. So the question was, like, how do I, like, reconcile that parts of my identity as, like, a queer person are, like, denied by Black people, and that, like, some Black people, like, deny queer identity as even, like, a, like, experience that a Black person can have? Well, first of all, that's completely ahistorical. Like it's literally just ahistorical. There are names for homosexual relationships in multiple African languages that have existed for like thousands of years. The idea that homosexuality is a white invention is actually just white supremacy. It's literally just an erasure of all of the historic evidence we have for queer people existing across the world since forever. There are animals that are gay. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous to say that, black people or queer people of color have to borrow that culture from white people. White people borrowed that from us. I mean, if you even think, even if you don't want to go all the way back to prehistoric history, you can literally just go to the 80s. I mean, white people fully stole ball culture, they stole the lingo, they stole the style of dress, they stole the damn flags. It's absolutely ridiculous to say that I have to take anything from white culture. I have never. Black people have never. No nation in this country has ever needed anything from white people. And so, I feel like when you have that historical grounding and, where, queer culture comes from, and, also the historical analysis of how intimately queer organizing is tied to the liberation struggles of black people, of Chicano people, of Asian Americans in San Francisco, for example, that stuff just falls off of you. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't stick because you know it's wrong.
And even if it doesn't feel wrong, it's wrong. I don't have anything profound to add to that because historically that is incorrect, right? Queerness, transness isn't borrowing from white culture. And also, I just want to recognize that, I feel that question very deeply as a Pakistani Muslim person. There are two different parts of my identity that often try to invalidate my queerness or my transness because it is seen as borrowing from American culture or white culture. It's rough out here, and also know that there's a cultural and educational aspect to it that I know that people in my community need to grow on and are working to grow on, and part of that, Jay, who has been teaching NARAC members about the historical the history of queerness and transness, not just in the United States, but the historical relevance of it. And I know that has helped to people within NARAC to grow, and I know it has helped me to grow. And so the relational piece of using that knowledge and applying it to your relationships, and even if it doesn't feel that way, it is that way.
So for our last question, we have, how do you get people motivated to stay and involved in an organization?
I think, first of all, I think it's natural for it to be there, ups and downs, even as individuals. I mean, personally, I can say that. Some days I feel like I can move mountains, and some days I just want to be at home, curled up and watching the news. So I think just giving people the space and the grace to understand that people go through ups and downs. But in terms of keeping people connected, I think stories and humanizing, even for people who work on the causes that we work with, oftentimes we may get, so caught up in the details and statistics and this and that, but sharing the real human stories of, Muhammad and Khadija and Eric and, all these people, and really bringing those stories to your communities, taking that time, it humanizes you, right? Maybe many of you have felt like this, you watch a video from Gaza and then you scroll and you feel gross. You're I just saw a dead person and I just scrolled, And then it's not like until you see another video that's so human and it breaks you, and you start sobbing, and you're like, okay, at least there's something left, there's something in my heart, at least, that I haven't completely been desensitized. So I think just continue to share stories, continue to bring people together. I think one of the things we realized, especially with Palestine, and since I covered something, a lot of it was like protest, go take the street, which is really important. And then we did Palestine book club, and we're like, man, it's just nice to sit, to hear each other, not be yelling, right? So you have to also be creative in how you bring people together. Try different things. And people have, some people really love the advocacy stuff. Some people love the protesting. Some people love the intellectual book club, right? You also have to engage people where they are and what really gets them going and what motivates them.
Also, a really good question. Sorry. I think that for me, it's really, and for a lot of people, not just me, it is deeply rooted on what kinds of relationships you have with the people around you. And so for me, organizing looks like a lot of different things. And primarily the people that I organize with, what keeps me going, what keeps me showing up to meetings and actions is the commitment that I've made to the people around me to struggle with them. And I know that on days that I'm not able to show up, and weeks that I'm not able to show up when I'm not feeling well, it's not just that there are people who see me as not engaging in the streets, but people who see me as engaging with myself to be able to come back and continue working. So yeah, the having grace for yourself aspect of it is super important, and also the ability to have grace for yourself is deeply connected to the grace that people show you.
Hey y'all, it's me again. So I've been organizing for 6 years, 7 years. Goodness gracious, okay. And there have been times where it has been uniquely difficult to keep up the energy, keep up the motivation. We organize against injustice and expose ourselves to it constantly as people of conscience, as people who want to see the world be better than it currently is. And I think the primary thing that's made it easier to keep going, despite how exhausting it is the fact that organizing is a collective effort. Fundamentally, when you organize, you are not an island unto yourself. You are part of a community, you're a part of a movement, everyone is working together. Which means, because let's be real, I'm sure people in this room have had jobs where if you didn't show up for work, that thing you do just didn't fucking get done. That's not how it is in organizing. If you have a day where you're I am so tired, I have other commitments, I want to spend some time with my family, I want to do something for myself, the work still happens because we do it together, we do it collectively. You are not the only person responsible for making the world a better place. That is our community's responsibility. So, which is why if you are interested in organizing, I suggest you actually join an organization. Perhaps one such as, I don't know, Freedom Road Socialist Organization over there. Or if you have a specific issue you're passionate about, there's the Minnesota Abortion Action Committee for Reproductive Rights, there's Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamar, for resisting police brutality, there's Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee for immigrant rights, there's the Anti-War Committee if you are looking to mobilize against imperialism and war. Also join your fucking union. I told myself I wasn't going to cuss, sorry.
Yeah, I really don't think this crowd cares. Also, this church is like decommissioned, so that's fine. Yeah, I think that what motivates me is that like all the people that I organize with, like we're all organizing around like very tangible goals. Like I think that something that frustrated me before I sort of joined Freedom Road and TCC4J was like a lot of people were just sort of like doing things. And there was no like sort of like larger plan behind it, and like there was no kind of like sense of like what are our larger like tasks, what are our like, why are we spending all this time on this particular like campaign, like why are we like working towards like this particular reform, but like not sort of thinking about like changing the power relationship between us and the police, for example. Like why are we focusing on like what the police are called? Like that seems pretty pointless to me. And I think that like what motivates me is that like I can see that we're making an impact. Like I see in our movement all the time when we have material wins. The driver's license for all campaign that Mirak did, that was a huge victory for like our like movement at large. You know, being able to call attention to CPCs is something that MNAC is doing that like was not happening on a huge scale before. TCC4J's work in getting all of these families finally getting recognition for like the fact that their loved one was even murdered by the police, which is something that routinely like is even denied people that are killed. Like they're just like, no, that didn't happen, this officer didn't kill you. Like I think that like I keep coming back to organize because I want to change things. And like I want those changes to be like measurable and noticeable. And like the people that I organize with are people that think that too. And so like I think that that's why we're always talking about like join an organization. Like join an organization that you see out here doing the work every day. Because those are the people that are ultimately going to change our society.
Thank you to everyone who submitted a question again. And can we get one final round of applause for our amazing panelists here? I've got a few more points I want to hit before I let you all go here. First of all is that Merlin has this basket here that they're going to run around with. We are asking for some donations for Freedom Road because things like reserving space and printing posters and getting food, they aren't free, and we want to be able to keep putting on these events for holidays as important as International Women's Day, etc. And so if you could please spread some generosity, and that basket will be going around. Speaking of printing costs, one of the things that we spend that money on are things such as these wonderful zines that you all, I think, have received. If you haven't, there are more at the back table over there. Olivia's doing a little dance with them right now. It's really nice. And the fun thing about these zines is not only is there information about the local struggles that all have to do with women's rights, with the rights of gender oppressed people locally and around the entire world, and it has a list of organizations that you can join to get your boots on the ground and really get into hands-on work and making a difference in this world that we live in. You can also unfold it at the halfway point, and there's a very cool poster in there. And so you can tell everybody who sees it that you love women. And reaffirm that women hold up half the sky, and where would we be without women, right? So, yeah, just my last couple housekeeping things. If you're interested in joining Freedom Road, you are impressed by what we had to bring to you today, please talk to one of us or go back to the table where the books are and everything, and we can chat about that, certainly. Join FRSO.org/join. And lastly, just to thank you all so much for showing up today to honor and celebrate the history and the present of, oh, one more thing, AW's Anti-War Committee yard signs. Please go buy those. So thank you for joining us to honor International Women's Day and the ongoing struggle for gender liberation, as it's inextricably tied to working class and national liberation as well. And we will keep doing the work, and I hope to see you all out in the streets and in organized. Tomorrow at the International Women's Day March in St. Paul. What's the intersection? Someone tell me?
It's near Snelling and University.
Near Snelling and University, and what are the parking lots outside of Allianz Field?
Shields and Snelling.
Shields and Snelling.
What time? What time?
At 1 p.m. I hope to see all of you there, so that you can walk the walk. I don't really talk the talk. Anything else I need to be reminded of while I have the microphone?
If there's anybody that has a sign, community control, police petition, we also have
Right
that.
here.
Yeah.
Yep, Umberto back there has a petition for you to sign if you are a Minneapolis resident to get that onto the ballot so that we can win community control of our police. Okay. Sanctuary state petition from Iraq over there with Erica. Please sign all of the things, and please join us at everything else that we do. And I'm going to end it with, from the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
within our lifetimes and by any means necessary.
Happy birthday, women.